Good morning. Thank you for joining me this morning. Today we're going to start with Matthew chapter 5, verse 31. Okay. And it says, "It hath been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced, committeth adultery." Now, I was looking at that word divorce. We talked about the Pharisees, and all the Pharisees saw was the letter of the law. That's all they saw. They didn't recognize the cause of it. Anger can build up and cause us to sin. It could cause us to murder, like we talked about a few verses ago. Well, lust is the same way. It can build up and it can cause us to sin. Lust can lead to adultery, which can lead to divorce. It can cost us our family. It can cost us everything. And this is a true statement. This is the one exception for divorce. Many marriages are lost because of it. We probably all know marriages that were lost because of fornication. And it all started in our heart with lust. We look at this verse in 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5. It says, "Bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ." We need to take care of those thoughts while they're just thoughts. We need to pick those weeds before we lose the whole garden. We need to get rid of that lust and anger before it costs us everything. Then we go to verse 33, Matthew chapter 5, verse 33, and it says again, "Ye have heard that it hath been said by them of old time, Thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths." I was looking at that word forswear. The word forswear means to swear an oath, or to commit to do something, to promise to do something. So they knew the 10 Commandments. They knew the 11th commandment, "Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor." Don't lie. They were taught that as long as they didn't lie, as long as you don't lie, you're fine. They thought it's okay. It's not okay to swear by God, but they thought it was okay to swear by everything else. And we know that by reading the next few verses. Verse 34, Matthew 5, verse 34 says, "But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou canst not make one hair white nor black." Jesus isn't saying they're wrong. We shouldn't lie. That's a true statement. It is wrong to bear false witness. Jesus is saying that there's more to it. Oaths are important. Jesus says, don't swear at all. Don't make an oath. We go to Numbers chapter 30, verse 2. It says, "If a man vow a vow unto the Lord, or swear an oath to bind his soul with a bond, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceedeth out of his mouth." We go to Deuteronomy 23, verse 21. And it says, "When thou shalt vow a vow unto the Lord thy God, thou shalt not slack to pay it, for the Lord thy God will surely require it of thee, and it would be sin in thee." If we make a vow, we have to keep it. It's a sin if we break it. So don't make an oath lightly. Take oaths seriously. We will be held accountable for what we say. Matthew 5, we're on verse 37. It says, "But let your communication be yea, yea, Nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. Our words should be in line with our actions. It should reflect our integrity. There should be no ambiguity or deception in our speech. You think of Jacob. Jacob disguised himself as his brother Esau. Isaac told Esau to go hunt a deer, kill make venison, which he loved, and bring it to him, and Isaac was going to bless him. And so Jacob disguised himself and pretended to be Esau, and he stole Esau's blessing. And because of that, he had to run from Esau. He had to run from his brother. Jacob worked for Laban to earn the right to marry his daughter Rachel, and Laban did the same thing to Jacob. Laban tricked him and gave him Leah instead. We need to be careful with what we do and with what we say. We need to tell the truth and stop there. When we commit to doing something, we should follow through with it. We can't say one thing and do another. We should be honest. In Proverbs, it says, lying lips are abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight. And in Ephesians 4, verse 25, it says, wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members one with another. We can be honest without making an oath. And after studying this, I didn't realize how much Jesus talks about the importance of our words. Okay, Matthew 5, verse 38. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. And again, ye have heard. All they could do is hear it. They couldn't read the Bible for themselves because it wasn't written in their language. They had to rely on what people taught them. They had to rely on the teacher or the preacher, and that's all they knew, whatever they were being told. And Jesus isn't saying that what they're hearing is wrong. He's just saying there's more to it. So let's read the law that they're talking about. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. This comes from Exodus chapter 21, starting with verse 23. It says, and if any mischief follow, then thou shalt give life for life. Come on. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. And Jesus isn't saying this isn't the law. He's just saying we need to go further than this. There's more to it than this. Verse 39, this is what the law said. Jesus is acknowledging that that's what the law said. This says, but I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. He's saying we're not resisting evil. We need to resist evil. Who is the evil one? The evil one is Satan. We go to James chapter 4, verse 7. It says, submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Resist Satan. Think when Jesus was tempted of Satan. When Jesus was tempted, every single time Jesus used the word. Jesus resisted Satan. And it says Satan fled from him. That's what we need to do. Looking back at this verse 39. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. We need to think before we respond. Our natural instinct is to fight back. But God is telling us, don't retaliate. Let God fight for us. The law causes us to seek revenge. Don't seek revenge. In Romans 12:19, it says, dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Let the Lord fight for us. Choose love over hatred. We need to choose mercy over revenge. In Proverbs 15:1, it says, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Hatred and arguing escalates the situation. It's like if somebody yells at you and you yell back, it's going to end up in a fight and everything. It's like putting fuel on the fire. If we answer with a soft answer, that diffuses the situation. It de-escalates it. We need to exercise self-control. We think of Saul. Saul was seeking David to kill him. King Saul was extremely jealous of David. 1 Samuel 24, verse 2, starting with verse 2, it says, then Saul, this is talking about King Saul, took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel and went to seek David and his men upon the rocks and of the wild goats. And he came to the sheepcotes by the way. There was a cave, and Saul went in to cover his feet. And David and his men remained in the sides of the cave. And the men of David said unto him, behold, the day of which the Lord said unto thee, behold, I will deliver thine enemy into thine hand, that thou mayest do to him as it shall seem good unto thee. Then David arose and cut off the skirt of Saul's robe privily. And it came to pass afterward that David's heart smote him, because he had cut off Saul's skirt. And he said unto his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing unto my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch forth mine hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord. David exercised self-control. He could have killed King Saul, but he didn't. He stopped. He let the Lord fight his battle. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. You think of revenge, don't seek revenge. You think of Cain and Abel. God told Cain and Abel to make a sacrifice. Abel's sacrifice was accepted, but Cain's was not. Cain sought revenge when he killed Abel, and God kicked him out of his presence. Revenge doesn't turn into anything good. It just keeps escalating. We need to let God handle it. Sometimes we race through this verse without really thinking about it. I know people can say things and do things that really hurt. And sometimes it's really hard to forgive them. I watched a documentary recently of this girl. She killed her boyfriend, and she talked her little brother into confessing for it because she had other crimes, and she knew if she was caught that she'd get the death penalty. So she talked her brother into saying that it was all his idea. This little kid's 12 years old. So he confesses to it. He spent 6 years in prison before they finally realized that he didn't have anything to do with it. And I think of that, how much that she really hurt her little brother. People can do things to us that really hurt. And sometimes things are hard, and sometimes things cut deep, and it hurts. But, my ultimate goal is that everyone makes it to heaven. I don't want to be the reason that someone doesn't make it. You don't have to talk to them. You don't even have to live by them. Block them from social media, whatever. But don't hurt them. Don't hate them. Just let God fight our battles. And we go to verse 40. In verse 40, Matthew 5, verse 40 says, and if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. A coat is defined as an undergarment or a tunic in the Bible, and a cloak is an outer garment. The Jews of Jesus' day wore two principal garments. This cloak was used not only as a jacket or overcoat during the day, but also as a covering to sleep under at night. By Mosaic law, and this is going to sound different to us, but the outer cloak was an unalienable possession that could not be withheld from a debtor overnight. And I'm getting this from Exodus chapter 22, starting in verse 26. It says, "If thou at all take thy neighbor's raiment to pledge, thou shalt deliver it unto him by that the sun goeth down. For that is his covering only. It is his raiment for his skin, wherein shall he sleep? And it shall come to pass when he crieth unto me that I will hear, for I am gracious." You know, Jesus is saying that if we are sued even for a trifling amount, we should be willing to give that up, give up what is rightfully ours just to diffuse the situation. Matthew 5:25 says, "Agree with thine adversary quickly while thou art in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison." This verse seems to suggest that even if it's not our fault, give it to them just to keep peace. Jesus wants us to show generosity and selflessness, mercy and love. Do more than is required. When I was a Girl Scout leader, our motto was to leave the room better than when we found it. Whatever it was, to do more, do more than is expected of us. Thank you for studying the Word with me today.